Hello, welcome to the Plant Party. Today we'll be talking about plant management before dormancy. The Plant Party is hosted by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Plant Party is a quarterly webinar series intended for advanced plant training and fun education. I'm Tim Sigmund, the Private Lands Program Leader with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. My co-hosts are Megan Clayton, Professor and Extension Range Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and Charles Kniper, State Resource Conservationist with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We have 15 wonderful door prizes we will be giving away as part of today's event. Our door prize donors today are committed to supporting you in your quest to learn more about plants. I'd like to thank Bamert Seed, Native American Seed, Texas Quail Forever, the Renewable Resources Extension Act, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service for donating these neat prizes.
Good morning, everyone. Today, our first presenter is Dr. Chris Miller. Dr. Miller currently serves as the Rangeland Management Specialist for Texas Panhandle and Western Rolling Plains. He received his bachelor's and master's degrees from Angelo State University and a doctorate degree from Texas Tech University. He joined NRCS in 2022 after serving a short stint at Brigham Young University. Chris's first position with NRCS was located in the northwestern region of Kansas, where he served as the Area Rangeland Management Specialist. He returned to Lubbock in 2024, taking over the Zone Rangeland Management Specialist position for Zone 1. He's presenting today a plant's perspective, so thanks for kicking us off, Chris.
Thank you, Charles. Like Charles said, my name is Chris Miller. I'm going to be giving a very, very brief overview of what a plant's perspective of dormancy and kind of what leads to a plant's perspective of dormancy. All right, today we're going to start off by asking some questions. What is plant dormancy? Why do plants go dormant? What triggers plant dormancy at the end of the day? And what do plants do to prepare for dormancy? So plant dormancy in a whole is just a natural process of many plants. We got our warm season plants that go dormant a little bit earlier in the fall. Our cool season plants come up. They get a little bit more vigorous, but then they go dormant when it comes to winter. But the whole point of plant dormancy is to conserve energy during times that are unfavorable to the plant itself to grow. During those times, it allocates energy down. It saves that energy for those favorable conditions, either in an upcoming spring or the summer. Why do plants go dormant? Like I said, energy conservation is the big thing here. Plants do not want to exert energy during times that are unfavorable to them, like warm season plants. Some are big blue stems, things like that, that we can see in some of these pictures. They don't grow during the winter. During that time, they don't need to exert energy, so it's better to conserve it. Protection from harsh conditions, something that we always see in Texas, drought. Drought and heat are two things we can depend on pretty much every other year or every year that comes. So during drought times, you might notice during the middle of the summer that a lot of our grasses start going a little bit yellowish, things like that. They're kind of going semi-dormant to conserve that energy for when favorable conditions come. Adaptation to seasonal changes, I kind of touched on warm season versus cool season. Every single plant has its own niche of where it grows the best. It's adapted to those niches over millions of years. It knows when it needs to grow and when it doesn't need to grow and when the conditions are favorable. Then stress response. That goes back to the drought. Less water, can't really grow during that time, or during harsh freezes. Harsh freezes can start that process. The main triggers of plant dormancy are going to be temperature changes. As you can tell, some places are in fall. If you're in southern Texas or central Texas, it might not feel fall for y'all. But up here in the Panhandle, we've had a couple cool days dropping into the 70s, into the 60s. We have some nights getting close to the 50s. Our temperatures are starting to change. So our plants are starting to slow down a little bit. Changes to photo period. Right now, we're in that timing that our day lengths are getting shorter overall. During this time, plants are starting to react. Plant growth is starting to slow. A lot of our plant growth is done, at least here in the Panhandle. Getting close to the border, you still got a little bit of time, and water availability. Here in the Panhandle, we got two main rainy seasons. We got the spring and we got the fall. During the spring, we have a lot of high growth. During the fall, we have a lot of high growth. But once that water turns off, our plants start adapting, going dormant. What do plants do to prepare? So slowing down of new net growth. A lot of it here in the Texas Panhandle, and this is probably due to most of Texas at the end of the day. The majority of our growth happens within the first 2/3 of the summer. So really, 2/3 of our growth is done by July-ish when it comes to our warm season grasses. After July, our plants are starting to prepare for dormancy. It's a little bit of little net growth, a lot towards the root systems, but we're starting to prepare for dormancy. That's why once we get into our September, October, it's so crucial to make sure our plants have enough solar panel or leaf mass to prepare for dormant season to get that little bit of growth that we can. Allocation of nutrients, once again, not a lot of growth that we can see physically above ground, but we're starting to ramp up our root systems underneath these plants. These root systems are where we're going to conserve and store a lot of the energy that's going to be used for the following year. Slowing of metabolic functions, we won't dig deep into that, but once again, it all ties together. The growth of the plant is starting to slow, metabolic functions are starting to slow with those photoperiods, and then start of conserving energy overall. And this energy is important to conserve because it makes sure those plants last through the winter, survive through the winter, and come up next spring. Simple signs of plant dormancy: no visible new growth. Like I said, stress responses you can see in the summer. You can see some yellowing starting. You don't see a lot of new green growth. Those are just responses of a semi-dormant going dormant to the weather that's happening. Wilting of plant parts. Sometimes wilting of plant parts is seen as death because they start wilting. We think wilting means the plant's dead. But if we dug up that wilting plant, it's probably not dead. We would look at that root mass, and those roots are probably nice and healthy as long as we have enough standing biomass there before. Then the most typical one, the yellow and browning of plant parts. This is the one that we all physically see. We don't like it. We like the nice green lush grasses out there. That's what we love for our cows. But really, that's just a response to saying, hey, it's time to go to sleep. Conditions are getting unfavorable for me. It's time to hibernate until next year. Plants will start appearing dry out there. But the thing in between a dry plant and a dead plant, when you go bend that stalk or that stem, it's still going to be malleable at the end of the day. It's not going to snap off and break completely. If all water content's gone and it's nice and gray and it snaps in half, that's probably plant parts dying, not dormancy. So really, this was a broad overview of plant dormancy. I didn't want to get into too much deep in detail about metabolic processes, things like that, all those science and little things that would escape people's minds. But plants go into dormancy to protect themselves. That is what they're doing. They're protecting themselves from conditions that are not favorable to them. It's just a natural response to say, hey, it's time. It's time for me. My year's over. I'll come back next year and I'll be even better. It's also time there to conserve the energy that we built up through having standing biomass and photosynthesis at the end of the day. Conserve it, keep it down low, and have it come back next year. So the better our root systems, the better our grasses are going to respond that following spring.
So thanks for that great presentation, Dr. Miller. We're going to go ahead and roll right into our second presentation. Next up will be Kason Habe. He's a technical assistant specialist with Texas Grazing Lands Coalition and a regional steward for the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Kason previously worked for the NRCS from 2007 to 2023, and most recently as a rangeland management specialist, serving the Grazing Land Coalition. Kason has a degree in rangeland ecology and management from Texas A&M and is a certified professional in range management. We'll turn it over to you, Kason. Tell us about the grazer's perspective.
All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit from the grazing perspective and focus a little bit more on the livestock side of things and some considerations that we may have for our livestock going into fall and going into winter before our plants go dormant. So some of the main animal considerations we have are the health of our livestock, animal performance, what stage they're in, when they're going to be calving, are they carrying calves into this time of year, or are they did we just wean calves? So what stage are they in? Are we trying to develop some heifers or something that we're going into winter with? And so some of our main considerations from that standpoint is, what is our forage quality? What is it now, and what is it going to be going through a winter and dormancy? And how much forage do we have out there? Do we have enough to hold these animals? And that all comes down to, what our supplementation plan is going to be. Before we get into that a little bit, I'd like to, Dr. Miller did a great job on the plants and dormancy, and want to just state that we probably need to, part of our supplementation plan and part of our grazing plan needs to be thinking about what plants are doing this time of year and this stage of dormancy that they're in. So during the fall before dormancy, our perennial warm season plants that we primarily depend on for our grazing forage throughout Texas are storing up carbohydrate reserves this time of year. And so in our grazing management plan, we want to make sure that we're deferring or resting as much country as possible during the fall to allow those plants to store up those carbohydrates. The other critical thing that they're doing this time of year is they're producing seed. And so that seed is firming up and ready to fall. So we want to make sure that we are deferring as much country as possible in the fall in order to allow those carbohydrates to be stored and that seed to be produced. Those carbohydrates that are being stored this time of year are used in the spring to grow new leaves come springtime. And so the more stubble, the more forage we can leave behind in the fall and in the winter, the better our plant response and growth is going to be in the spring. So some of the questions that, I ask myself this time of year, okay, how many animals do I have out there? What are their requirements as far as the quantity of forage? How much forage are they consuming? And what quality of forage do they need based on what stage those animals are in? And then the other thing on the other side of the picture is, well, how much forage do I have out there on the ground? And what is the quality of that forage? So I want to make sure that there's enough forage to last me through really April at this point, based on how many head of livestock I have. Because if we don't get our rains in, we don't get any winter rain or minimal winter rain, we may not get the forage growth and response in March that we're expecting. And so we need some time to make culling decisions if we have to, throughout the winter and springtime. And then what quality is that forage out there? And there's several ways we can look at measuring or estimating that. But we want to make sure that the quality of forage, if it's not meeting our livestock demands, that we're going to be able to supplement that appropriately. So if we don't have enough forage, by October timeframe, we need to be looking and calculating that forage. And if we don't have enough to make it through the winter at that point, we need to be looking at reducing stock. So looking at forage growth, forage quantity, throughout the year, this is a growth curve that comes from the ecological site descriptions. This is for a clay loam site in the Edwards Plateau. And so this looks, pretty similar across the state. It varies a little bit, but, typically we have a bimodal rainfall pattern and forage growth pattern. So we're going to get a lot of our growth in, April to June timeframe. And then of course we have the summer slump, and then we get some more growth in September, October timeframe. It really starts slowing down, and through the winter we get very minimal growth. And most of that growth through the winter is from cool season type of forbs and that sort of thing. So heading into winter, we are planning on, some of this forage that we grew in the spring and fall. That's what we're planning on grazing in the wintertime, that standing forage. And so we're not planning on getting much growth. So like I said, by October, November timeframe, we know how much forage we have to make it through the winter. So we can accurately estimate, okay, based on the number of head I have right now, the amount of forage that's out there. By October, November timeframe, we can accurately estimate how many head we're going to be able to carry through winter. So looking at that, diving a little deeper in that, this time of year, we want to make sure our animal demand is going to be less than or equal to our forage available out there on the landscape. So we know that one animal unit, okay, an animal unit is a 1,000-pound cow with or without her calf by her side. She consumes about 30 pounds a day. We also know that most of our animals, most of our cattle in the state of Texas are much larger than 1,000 pounds. So I usually go ahead and at least estimate that most folks, animals are going to be 1,200-pound cows or better. And so a 1,200-pound cow is consuming about 36 pounds of forage per day, of dry forage per day. Then we can estimate the amount of forage out there on the landscape, either by clipping. We're not going to go through that in detail today because we don't have the time, but we can clip forage, dry it, weigh it, estimate how much forage we have out there, or we can use some online tools available to us like the rangeland analysis platform, and that'll give us a decent idea of how much forage is out there on the landscape. So here's just some examples, bottom part of this slide on how to calculate that. So if we have 1,200-pound cows and we're holding those, November through April, so we've got about 6 months time frame that we want to have those on there. And we've got about, say, just for example, we've got 2,000 pounds of forage out there on the landscape on about 500 acres. So those calculations would be, you take that 2,000 pounds of forage that you have out there, our take half, leave half rule. All right. So we're gonna only use 25% of that forage. We're gonna utilize half of it, but half of what we utilize is going to be wasted or utilized by other animals, not our cows. And so only 25% is going to make it into our cows, Reuben, or whatever other animal we're grazing. And so we only have about 500 pounds per acre of usable forage out of that 2,000 times 500 acres. So we get 250,000 pounds of forage available. If we divide that by 36 pounds a day, that's how much a 1,200-pound cow consumes, divided by 180 days or 6 months, then we come out with about 38 cows worth of forage on that 500 acres. So we know at that point how much forage we have. If our stock numbers are more than 38, then we need to be looking at reducing stock. If they're less than 38, great. We're going to have extra forage out there on the landscape we can put back into the soil for soil health and to build our soil organic matter. So let's look a little bit at forage quality. So these are some graphs from a publication that AgriLife Extension put out several years ago. And they did some fecal NIR analysis across the state through the GAN lab, Grazing Land Animal Nutrition Lab. And so they took those results and they kind of looked at different times of year and what that forage quality was that those animals were eating. So they did this all across the state and broke it out into different regions. So the red bars here, this first graph on the left is crude protein. Looking at crude protein, and the red bars is the kind of the high regions of the state where that high crude protein was. So mostly those were coastal prairie, blackland prairies. Those were kind of that's more fertile soils, and so that forage quality is higher in those areas. And then if you look at those green bars, that's kind of the lower quality regions, which includes the Edwards Plateau, Trans-Pecos, High Plains, that sort of thing. That blue bar in the middle is kind of the average of the state. So that's the average crude protein, different times of the year. So you can see that, the general curve, in the springtime when that forage is growing, we've got higher quality forage. It's got more crude protein in there. Same thing, you look over on the curve on the right, that's the digestibility of that forage. We get a peak in April, May timeframe on that curve as well. And then it falls throughout the year, and winter is kind of the low time frame on that. So we know September, October time frame, we're heading into dormancy, we're heading into winter, and that's when that forage quality starts to bottom out on us. So let's overlap that a little bit with our animal demands and kind of see where we're deficient. So the red line here is forage quality average forage quality in the Edwards Plateau region of Texas. Okay. And then I've got a gray line here that is an example of animal demands. Okay. So what the quality that animal needs throughout the year for a spring calving herd. Okay. And then the blue line is a fall calving herd. Okay. So in the Edwards Plateau, a spring calving herd, if we're calving in March, some folks will calve earlier in February. And we have a time period there where we're needing to supplement still in order to meet those needs of that animal. Okay, but if we move that back and calve in March, we align pretty good with that forage curve of when our forage quality is starting to improve, and we're starting to get that new growth in the spring. And so we have a time period there that the quality of that forage is exceeding maybe what an animal needs, and so they're able to gain weight. In reality, that typically they're not gaining that much because we have these calves on them, okay, that are just born, and they're drawing them down some. So in reality, we're usually not seeing that much gain there, but we can get some gain there in the spring if we hit it right. And then we've got the summer slump where that forage quality gets low due to drought-induced dormancy or heat-induced dormancy in the wintertime. And so our forage quality drops. Our animal demand, we still have these cows nursing, and so our calves nursing, and so our animal demand is still high. And so a lot of times we need to provide some sort of supplementation during the summer time frame. And then, of course, what we're talking about today, we're heading into winter. If we have weaned those calves this time of year, then we're reducing the animal demand on those cows. And so we're probably not in too bad of shape going into winter. We may have to provide some supplement on dry cows during the winter, but it's not going to be a whole lot. Conversely, if we are calving this time of year, especially if we're in the Edwards Plateau or north, and we're calving this time of year, we're going to have to really supplement those animals during the wintertime because our animal demands greatly outweigh what our forage quality is out there on the landscape. In South Texas, this curve does not look so bad as South Texas, the coastal prairie, and South Texas plains close to the coast. We pick up a few more annual forbs and stuff during the wintertime and cool season forage that allows that forage to maintain a higher quality during the wintertime. So it depends on where you're at in the state. So looking at forage quality, one thing it's good to monitor this time of year is what the quality is of that forage. We can do that in a few different ways. One is by looking at their fecal samples, okay? And as those cow patties start to stack up, we know that forage quality is lower. There's some this comes from an extension publication, and so there's some good pictures in there on how to estimate that visually. We can also take use of the Grazing Land Animal Nutrition Lab. We can send fecal samples in to them, and they will analyze those samples and give us a good idea of the quality of forage those cattle are consuming. Another thing we want to be watching is their body condition score. Is it dropping? Is it increasing? We expect it to probably decrease some during the wintertime, but we don't want it dropping fast, and we want to try to maintain it as much as possible. Another crucial thing is when we want to think about when we're going to be breeding back. We have a fall calving herd. The nutritional demands are high this time of year, and then they're also going to be breeding back during the wintertime. So we want to make sure we're providing enough supplement in order to keep them at a body condition 5 or better, so that the breed back success will be good. So last thing, just wanted to, all that comes down to what we are going to supplement. So I wanted to take a look at some supplementation options quickly. So we see a lot of folks supplementing with hay and hay only during the wintertime. So if we have adequate forage, if we did step number 1 that we talked about of making sure we have adequate forage out there on the landscape, we have no need to supplement with a hay supplement. The only thing we're going to be deficient in is protein. And so We start looking at some other protein options. You go look at what the feed store sells the most of. It's usually about a 20% breeder cube. And is that cube providing what we need in the wintertime? So as we were looking at our forage quality earlier, our biggest deficit is on crude protein. And so a 20% breeder cube has 20% crude protein. For a couple of bucks more by the bag, you can usually get a cottonseed cube, or it's usually a 39 or 40% cube. And that gives you a lot more bang for your buck as far as what those animals need this time of year. A lot of folks also use molasses tubs, and these are something that is very convenient. We can set it out there, forget about it. We don't have to feed them, 2 or 3 times a week. We can, put a tub out there once a week or whenever it's needed, and they can eat on it. The price of these is per pound of protein is way more expensive than when we're looking at like cottonseed cubes. Alfalfa is also can be an effective supplement during the wintertime. Especially it has a lot of energy in it. So towards the end of winter, February time frame, it can really be effective as they may be a little bit more deficient in energy that time of year. And it also has high crude protein as well. So that could be an option, a good option for you too.
Thank you, Kason. That was great.
Next up, we have Brandon Bean to speak on moisture management and the moisture management forecast. Brandon is a grazing specialist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service out of Palestine, Texas, and is the recipient of the 2024 National Hugh Hammond Bennett Conservation Planner Award. He has worked in East Texas with NRCS for over 15 years. Brandon is a husband and a father and enjoys spending time with family and being outdoors. He graduated with a degree in animal science from Texas A&M in 2008. Brandon, it's all yours.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you. And thank you to Chris and Kason for y'all's presentations. I think this one will follow up really well with that in mind. Mine takes a little more macro look and kind of ties the human element into the grass and into the grazer talk we've given here. I'd like to start this morning with a question to all of you. What if I could tell you something that would completely change the way you farm and ranch? Please keep that question in the back of your mind. Hopefully we'll come to that answer at the very end of the presentation. I'd like to now read you a quote from the book, The Time It Never Rained by Elmer Kelton. It was written about a 7-year drought from 1950 to 1957 in West Texas. And the novel starts like this. It crept up out of Mexico, touching first along the brackish Pecos and spreading then in all directions, a cancerous blight burning a scar upon the land. Just another dry spell, men said at first. Why worry? They said it would rain this fall. It always had, but it didn't. And many a boy would become a man before the land was green again. Many land managers and ranchers alike have experienced similar transformative moments. And in this state, this great state we live in, you don't have to wait long before you will be tested in some extreme fashion. Although I've never experienced a 7-year drought, I can still remember the worst 1-year drought in recorded state history. It started about this time of year in 2010. The fall rains never came. And at the end of 2011, this great state had lost about 1 out of every 10 trees. Complete fields of grass were lost, leaving nothing but bare soil. Although it was over 14 years ago and I was just a young conservation planner in Fairfield, Texas at the time, I can still remember having those hard conversations with producers out there on the land. As we walked the pastures and looked things over, it was truly a transformative moment for me. You could see it was not only affecting their lands, but it was affecting them. I can still remember also a few years back in San Angelo, we went on a GLC grazing lands tour to a rancher who had experienced several droughts through his career. And he said something that stuck with me, and I'll never forget it. He said, I no longer pray for rain, but rather I pray for the strength to get through the trial. Droughts and chaos can be perspective shaping experiences. Um, they're ones that we won't ever forget. Even in my own operation, I remember 2011. It's at the background at all times. The decisions I make, the decisions we all make, if we've been through things like that, we never forget those moments, what those experiences, how they've changed us, how they've changed our management, because they're supposed to. We need to start looking at them as opportunities. We need to look at them as seasons and experiences that will shape and prepare us for the future. And they're wake-up calls for doing things differently. So some of the proactive approaches, the things we can do instead of being reactive, some things we can do that are really simple is the ones that are readily available to us right there on the internet. Utilizing the U.S. Drought Monitor can show you, what county you're in, what the counties around you are doing. Are they getting dry? Because usually those things start to cycle in an area. We can also look at long-range climatology reports, statistical patterns. These guys look at currents in the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean and what's happening on a global level and make forecasts to help you to see maybe are the next 3 months going to be drier than usual? Are they going to be wetter than usual? What are we looking like? These are just some very simple things that people and producers I work with utilize to help make decisions. You can also look for near surface soil moisture monitoring maps online. Shows you what the moisture level is in a given area. And then probably the biggest and best thing you can do is just observe. How is your land responding to moisture or lack thereof? Just daily observation out there on the property. Here's the forage growth curves. I believe it was Cason's presentation. He brought these forage growth curves up. You can see exactly what he was talking about. Those bimodal curves on those warm season grasses over there. That's very typical for our state, for our region. Just having an understanding of these growth curves can be a game changer for a producer. Knowing when to expect that grass growth. And if it's not coming, if you're not getting those April, May, June rains, well, you're not going to get that much production. So just keeping that at the back of your mind, paying attention. Some other things we can start to think about is how can we overlap some of these forage curves. You can see those cool seasons provide a pretty awesome little growth there when the warm seasons are not growing. And we could try to build a forage bridge, we would call it, to make it all the way through the growing season in some of these systems and some of your regions. These are just things to think about. And then this time of year, as we go into dormancy, Dr. Chris spoke on this. Just some things to be thinking about is what does your stockpile look like right now? It's, depending on when the frost date comes, we could still grow a little more grass here. Over here in East Texas, where I'm at, we've got a lot of soil moisture. Soil temperatures are still up. We could get a lot of growth out of some of these exotic grasses that we have over here, these sod-forming grasses, Bahia, Bermuda grass. You can get a pretty high forage quality dormant pasture before the frost hits. So these are things to be thinking about. You also may be getting ready, some of you, for overseeding your pastures with a clover or ryegrass. These are things we want to be looking and forecasting, thinking about as, what's that soil moisture looking like? How is it going to do if I plant a seed right now? And Kason mentioned this in his talk also, the rangeland analysis platform. This is really that next level of forecasting that a rancher has readily available at his fingertips. He can, or anyone can pull up their own properties on that range analysis platform, and they can get an idea of historical trends, site specific to their property. This technology utilizes satellite imagery and also thousands and thousands of data points of ground data that give us statistical patterns that correlate to vegetative cover types and biomass. So if contrast is the mother of clarity, then look at last year here on a ranch that I did a grazing plan for. In 2024 on the left there, you can see, that green, darker green color, that's showing us we're getting higher on the end of the spectrum there for biomass production. You can see that production correlated to about 148 animal units. And then on the right, there's 2011. There's that bad drought. Almost a 50% reduction in carrying capacity. So studying the past can really help us to avoid future mistakes. Here's a link to the rangeland analysis platform. If you haven't ever utilized it, I'd encourage you to do so. This is a free service that's available to anyone out there. And you can launch that map, that blue button there, and you can take off, go draw your property, and start doing some studying and utilize this as a tool. They also have some derivative programs on the site that you can access. One of the programs that we utilize a lot here for writing grazing plans and monitoring is the Production Explorer. So this specific program, utilizing that same technology, it's a lot more dynamic. So it tells me what's going on a 16-day increment. They load a new data point into the system. And so I can see real time how the growing season's going. And it gives you products like this. So you can see that black line there, that's 2025. It's not completed yet. And you can see there's that growth curve. Remember that plant growth curve? Well, here it is on the line as far as production goes on that satellite imagery. You can see we're somewhere between the long-term average and the 125% line. So, an above average year, which I would agree with that here. And then for contrast, again, that blue line, you can load any year that you'd like to compare. You can see that was 2011. And you can see at times in 2011, we were 50% below the long-term average. Here that is again. This is on a cumulative production curve. So that's, as we grow, we're acquiring forage through the growing season, and you see how long or what that total biomass production is at the end of the year. Just another way to look at the data. Again, we're trending this year, this ranch is, on that average line. And then you can see 2011's that blue line. It trended really well with the 50% line. So utilizing a technology like this that's real time, dynamic, can show you at least what you need to be thinking about as far as which trend line you're on and seeing what kind of production differences you might could expect. Just looking down the road, looking down the horizon. We can then take that data and put it into our grazing plan. How many days of expected feeding, Kaysen talked about supplementation, utilizing those forage forecasts and a dynamic grazing plan. We can now see, okay, I'm probably not going to have to feed any hay this year unless we get some kind of bad ice storm, or maybe it's a bad drought year and this forage forecasting tool is helping me to see I really need to be thinking about what I'm doing. Do I need to destock? Or in some years, do I need to increase because I've got excess forage? So just having a grazing plan gives you that plan A approach. And that's a good thing. A plan A is a good thing. But effectively carrying out plan B or C or D when chaos comes down the road, that's how you go from good to great. The managers that have contingency plans that they implement and without, it's able to allow you to pull the emotion out of the situation when that drought comes. You've got a plan on paper of what you're going to do when you're looking at the weather, how you're forecasting things. Just gives you a great decision-making framework in your monitoring and your forecasting and just helping you to keep an eye out and be a better manager. So Chris spoke on the plant's perspective and Kaysen the grazer's perspective, but the intersection of those things occur at the soil level. All these things work together in concert. We can hone our craft to be a better decision maker and efficient manager, but if we don't lead the land better than the way we found it, what are we really doing anyways? The soil's function and our management thereon affect all parts of the whole. It is the literal and metaphoric bedrock of not only any ag endeavor, but a wildlife enthusiast, a backyard pollinator gardener, but also every civilization. It doesn't matter how much rainfall you receive in a year, it only matters how much you capture. This is what we call effective rainfall, and it occurs through soil infiltration. So water going into the land for the plants and the water tables instead of across the land and down the creek, into the river, into the ocean. Here's an existing project that we have going on a ranch here in East Texas where we're studying different plant types, different vegetations, different management techniques, and how that's affecting the water infiltration on that site. So this specific one is a very diverse pasture. It's got a lot of plant species in it. It's got a lot of native plant species in it, even some greenbrier and dewberry, some things that most ranchers probably don't want on their property, but they are serving a function. You can see the dark color of that soil, pretty high in organic matter, and we infiltrated 1 inch of rainfall in 3 minutes and 28 seconds. About 1,000 feet away on the same soil type, but this field has a cotton farming history from years before, and you can see there's a visible loss of topsoil there. There's also a reduction in soil organic matter, and this soil sports a pretty dense compaction layer within the top 8 inches of the soil, which greatly affect our infiltration. You can see this one, 12 minutes and 2 seconds. That same inch of rainfall took that long to infiltrate that into the soil. This resulted in a volume of captured difference of almost 350%. So which soil is going into the drought first? Which one is coming out of the drought first? Contrast is the mother of clarity. Well, I hope I've given you some new ideas and some tools to make you a better land steward and a chaos planner. I hope these tools and this talk have better equipped you and edified you, your resolve to do right by yourself and the land, plants, animals, and community that you work with every day. I hope the next perspective crafting high pressure system doesn't pass you by without you sinking your roots a little deeper and knowing that you are not in control, but you can be prepared. In fact, that is the answer to the question from Wendell Berry that I asked at the beginning of the talk. What if I could tell you something that would completely change the way you farm and ranch? There is a God, and you are not him. Thank you. Please let me know if I can ever help anyone in any way. And that's what NRCS is here for. All of these services, AgriLife, TPWD, appreciate what y'all do in putting on this program. It's a good one, and all of your work out there in your prospective counties. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. As always, that was a great presentation. Next up, we're moving on to seeds. Jameson Crumpler is a graduate of Sul Ross State University with the Bachelor of Science in Natural Resource Management. From 2014 to 2019, Jameson was a research technician for Texas Native Seeds in Alpine, Texas. In November of 22, Jameson rejoined Texas Native Seeds as the new assistant director for the Permian Basin and Panhandle Native Seed Project ecoregions. He's been with Texas Native Seeds for 8 years, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about seeds now. Welcome to the Plant Party, Jameson. I'll turn it over to you for your presentation.
So, I work for Texas Native Seeds. I'm the assistant director up here in the Permian Basin in the Panhandle. Been here for about 8 years. Just going to talk about some strategies to promote native seed production in a natural environment for kind of a broad topic. What is Texas Native Seeds? So we are a statewide collaborative research and development group. Basically, we create native seed sources. Not all seed sources are created equal. Some parts of the state don't have access to adapted seed sources. And so we evaluate these across our 6 project regions, and each project region kind of have their own core species that they focus on. And then some species we're able to collaborate across all the different project regions on. Real quick, Permian Basin Panhandle. I'm based in Lubbock. I'm also based in Midland, and then I spent a lot of time in Amarillo. So if you're in any of those 3 cities, you'll probably see me at some point. Permian Basin Panhandle Native Seed Project is the newest project region in the Texas Native Seed Program. We started about 2017. Our project region stretches from Midland to the top of the Texas Panhandle on the west side with New Mexico, and we go about as far east as Abilene. So a pretty big area. Really, we only cover broadly 2 ecoregions, the high plains, the Llano Estacado, and then the rolling plains. Some people will separate some of those out a little bit further, but just for this discussion, it's just those 2 ecoregions. And then also here's a map showing all of our project regions across the statewide area. So there's an assistant director in every project region. So wherever you are listening in from today, there will be somebody to help you, and we can talk about that later on. Texas native seed model ultimately is based on, can the population of a given plant produce seed at commercial scale? And so that's what it has to be able to do, because our, what we call releases, what some people may call a cultivar, some people may call it a variety, a strain, a line, all of that, it is grown at commercial scale, because we're not able to do that. We're not a commercial seed company. We just do the legwork. We do the research, the development. We do the seed counting. We do the evaluations. So we do all the really nerdy, sciencey stuff. The seed industry does all the farming side of it. What we found over the years that not all native plant species meet this criteria. This is why you'll see that on the seed market, there's only X number of plants available. And then you go out into your diverse pasture and you're like, well, I have way more plants than what's on the market. Well, that's why not every species can fit into an agronomic setting. Just a quick proof of concept of the Texas native seed model. On the left, we have, and this is the picture of cowpen daisy. Both of these trays were planted in the greenhouse at the same time, same amounts of seed. And this is why we do what we do. You sort through the riffraff, so to speak. On the left, population A, we know where it comes from. We know the ecological site that plant was growing in. We know the soils. We know the precipitation zone, et cetera, et cetera. On the right is what you will see in the seed industry called VNS, which stands for variety not stated. Sometimes the VNS is listed as, end quote, native. Native is not a variety, it's just another way that the industry would say variety not stated. But it just proves the point that it is worth the time to evaluate the population and find the high performing winners. Just like humans, all plant populations have their strengths and have their weaknesses. So this portion is about seeds. Seeds come from flowering plants. Flowering plants are the angiosperm. They've been around for about 300 million years. They have evolved to reproduce by seed. Basically, all of this on this slide to say that flowering plants dominate the world, essentially. If we didn't have flowering plants, I don't know what we would eat. Seed crops in a flowering plant. As with anything in life, a lot of variation. You can track the variation through the year, through the season, between plant communities, within plant communities, between species and within species. All of that variation is natural, and all of that variation is what makes native plants and their community resilient to stress, to drought. Yeah, a lot of native plants died in the 2011 drought, but because they were able to produce seeds before the drought and in the years leading up to the drought, a lot of those plant communities returned. Maybe they were in different shape, maybe they had a different look, maybe they had a different dominant species, but they were able to return in some way, shape, or form. In areas that were really hit by the drought where the native plants did not return, the presumption is that perhaps they did not flower and set seed enough. Sure, some perennial plants reproduce vegetatively, but because they're an angiosperm, the vegetative reproduction is not always a given. And the vegetative reproduction tends to ebb and flow a lot more than the flowering production does. So in your pasture, in your rangeland, in your garden, whatever it may be, if you can work with that variability, that's going to increase plant health and increase the health of everything else on your landscape. Native plant variability is seemingly endless. Once you start to look at all the details, you'll pull your hair out trying to figure out where the end of the variability is. So one strategy in land management, natural resource management, is to mow, burn, graze, bale, whatever you do, that's some kind of variability that is, as much as possible, roughly equivalent to what you are seeing in nature. Now, that's not always possible. Maybe the timing of your variability is what's different. Maybe the intensity of your variability is what's different. But if you're doing something different every year, you're going to have a lot more variable results, which increases the resilience in the health of your native plants. Every seed crop that a flowering plant makes is critical to a plant's survival. This is a pretty easy experiment. You can set up two plants side by side, and every time plant A flowers, you cut the flower off, but you leave plant B alone. Every time plant A flowers, you cut the flower off, but you leave plant B alone. And you repeat that process. And then over time, you're going to see plant A die for a number of reasons. Plant B, you're going to see it continue, and you're going to see recruits or offspring from that plant. So basically, this means anytime there is a seed crop, especially when there is a bumper crop, allow those bumper crops to flourish. During bumper crop years, that's when the greatest seed production potentially is. And so there is a natural variability to bumper crops for any given species. That the saying goes, every dog has its day, well, so too did every native plant most of the time. And so when you see a native plant having a bumper crop or a banner year, or just an explosion of flowers and seeds, that means things are going pretty well. And so we would want to step back, let that species do what it has evolved to do over millions of years. One example of a bumper crop year, and I'm looking at this from in the South Plains and up into the Panhandle, Sawleaf daisy, which is an annual in the sunflower family, it is appearing to have a bumper crop year on some sites. I have seen hundreds and hundreds of acres of it throughout the region, from as far south as Midland and all the way up near Amarillo. So for whatever reason, this species decided that this year is going to be its bumper crop year. It is ensuring a little bit more success for that species for the next several generations. And again, this is a natural phenomenon that happens every once in a while. So again, like I said earlier, this is kind of a broad topic, but when dealing with flowering plants in native plant communities, when they flower, it's okay. Let them flower. Let them set seed. Let that seed shatter, basically fall off the plant and fall to the ground. If we interfere with any of that, especially at flowering and especially at seed set, we can over time cause that population or that species to decline. Real quick, just some helpful references, obviously not an exhaustive list. Most of these are plant ID guides. They're pretty easy to read, easy to follow. They're not really heavy on technical terminology. And then the landscape ecology book is one that I don't see gets mentioned a whole lot. So I thought that I would throw it in there, but it gives a really good perspective of how to manage flowering plants at the landscape scale. Texas Native Seeds at the program, we're here to help. We're here to help landowners. We can help you with plant identification. We can make site visits and see what's going on and give you some ideas. We can do restoration, reclamation consulting, and sort of our bread and butter is that we put together seed mix recommendation for anybody who wants it. If you scan the QR code, it would take you to the personnel listing for our Texas Native Seed website, where you'll be able to get in touch with an assistant director in their project region. If you fall into two project regions, maybe contact both. But we're happy to help for any kind of questions that anyone has about anything relating two native plants, native seeds.
Great. Thanks so much, Jameson. That was a good presentation. Now we're ready to get started on our last presentation. Our final speaker is Dr. Josh McGinty. Dr. McGinty serves as an associate professor and extension agronomist for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. He specializes in row and forage crops in South Texas, and he's based at the Texas A&M AgriLife Research and Extension Center in Corpus Christi. I'll turn it over to you, Dr. McGinty, to speak on weed management opportunities before and during dormancy.
Thank you, Megan. Pleasure to talk to you all today. Looks like a really fantastic crowd. I cut my teeth in the weed science realm in grad school and kind of continue to that specialty today. So a lot of the work I do is with weed ecology, weed resistance, herbicide efficacy, herbicide safety, things like that. So I'm coming at this from the lens of, what opportunities present themselves from now as the season starts to wind down and then through the dormant season leading up to next spring. And specifically, problem weeds that we don't have other easier ways to solve, what opportunities do get presented to us during this period of time. And so there's a couple of concepts that are, I think, important to start with. One of these is herbicide selectivity. And typically when we say herbicide selectivity, then we're going to talk about selective herbicides versus non-selective herbicides, meaning some herbicides are inherently selective in which types of plants they control and which types of plants can tolerate them. Big example there for most of us is going to be like 2,4-D, dicamba, triclopyr, the things we tend to use in range and pasture to control brush or broadleaf weeds in a grass setting. Those are selective herbicides. They are very effective on broadleaf or dicot species, very safe on monocots or grasses. Through the lens of what we're talking about here today, I'm not as concerned with that version of herbicide selectivity. What I'm actually going to take the track on here in a couple examples is the use of a non-selective herbicide, meaning a herbicide that doesn't really differentiate between different plants. It's just effective on plants, period. The big example there being glyphosate, which we commonly known as Roundup in a lot of cases. It's a non-selective systemic herbicide, controls annuals, perennials. Most any green vegetation we put glyphosate on, it will have some impact, right? But using that non-selective herbicide in a selective way, because the application timing dictates selectivity as well, not just the inherent characteristics of the herbicide in question. And when we're talking about these grazed systems, whether it's rangelands or intensively managed pastures, introduced pastures, hay fields, we're not just dealing with a simple system. We're dealing with an ecosystem. We have annuals and perennials that are greening up, going into dormancy, petering off in the case of, say, cool season annuals in the spring. We're dealing constantly with different species, different classes of vegetation, reaching their peak in terms of growth and development, and then coming back down. And so the timing of a non-selective herbicide in a system like that sometimes allows us to control weeds that we otherwise would have a difficult time controlling. The other concept that's going to be important for what we're talking about is what a pre-emerge herbicide does, because there's some opportunities during the coming months to integrate pre-emerges. So pre-emerge herbicides are those herbicides that prevent or inhibit the emergence of certain species from seed. So typically pre-emerges are more of a tactic against annual species, meaning they're coming from seed each season. Okay, they're not coming back from rootstock. Because they're coming from seed, because that seed is very shallow in the soil profile, that allows us to use pre-emerge herbicides to selectively control those plants versus our established perennials. Understand, please, that pre-emerges are treating soil. We're not necessarily treating plants. We're treating soil where we anticipate a weed is going to emerge later in the season. These herbicides have to be applied before germination and emergence of these annual weeds. they have to be typically washed into the soil through rainfall. So that dictates when we're going to apply these. We need to apply them far enough in advance. We have time for that activating rainfall to occur and for all that to happen before these weeds start to come up. They don't kill the seed, they actually kill the plant after germination and before emergence. So in that critical period of time, when the seed puts out a root and a shoot, if we're targeting those with a pre-emerge, hopefully that pre-emerge herbicide gets taken up and just inhibits that whole process from there on. So those two things out of the way. Don't beat me up too bad on this, but this is a really idealized version of what's happening in the fall leading into the winter in, say, a county somewhere between Corpus and Houston, relatively close to the coast. And I'm using that as an example because that's mostly the region I work in. I know that area better than other areas of the state. So as we go west and north in the state, all these dates are going to shift earlier, of course. But what I'm looking at here is, let's say this is a Bermuda grass hayfield. So probably hybrid Bermuda grass. This chart is showing you the day of the year going from about October 1st through the middle of December. And we've got several different species shown here. And as they go from 0%, we're talking about a plant that is either in full dormancy or is still just cold seed in the ground. As it goes up to 100%, now we're looking at 100%. That is a plant operating in its optimal temperature range, healthy, active growth, given we have moisture. So I want to start with the blue line, darker blue line. In this case, that's Bermuda grass. Bermuda grass is pretty tropical in its nature. Okay, you can see that if you just look at the distribution of Bermuda grass in the U.S. It's southern, right? Being tropical in nature, it's going to be one of the first perennial warm season grasses in these systems to drop out and go into dormancy in the fall. So in this case, I'm saying about mid to late October, you can see that dark blue line start to decrease. And by sometime in November, full dormancy. From one year to the next, that can change widely. Of course, it depends on the weather. But in this example, that's what we're going to go with. Then in the green line, we have annual ryegrass. Not a big issue where I'm at right now in Corpus Christi, but as I go further north on the coast, yeah, annual ryegrass can be good or bad depending on what your goals are. A lot of the hay producers I work with view it as a weed because it uses moisture all through the winter that we would want our Bermuda grass to have in the spring. And it's also going to make a lot of biomass that's going to compete with that Bermuda grass in the spring during that transition. So in this case, we see our ryegrass start to emerge sometime in late October. Again, that can vary from year to year, but then it really reaches its full potential sometime in November. And then we see another couple lines as we go to the right. I've got a warm season perennial there, Dallas grass. Again, if you're just grazing, it's a pasture, you may be fine with Dallas grass. In a high quality hay scenario, I may not want that species in there, but in any case, it tends to go dormant a little later than Bermuda grass. So you can see here, 2 or 3 weeks in this case difference. And then we also see a warm season annual grass in this system, sandbur, that's starting to drop out about that same time. So in this example, we have a couple opportunities that present themselves. Number one, if annual ryegrass is a weed for my goals, again, this is probably more in the hay producer side of things. If I want to prevent that moisture loss and that competition from ryegrass that's going to impact me next spring, I can control ryegrass a couple different ways. One of the opportunities here is, of course, to put a pre-emerge down before the ryegrass comes up. So sometime in September, sometime, from now through early October, we could introduce a pre-emerge herbicide into that pasture, into that hayfield to prevent ryegrass from ever coming up. Again, it needs to be done early enough to allow time for a rain to occur between when that spray is made and when the ryegrass is going to come up. You as a landowner know roughly, on average, when those annual grasses are going to start to appear, those cool season annuals. So you're going to have to start doing a little thinking on the calendar about when to apply, timing of which varies greatly as you go from south to north and from east to west. But that's one opportunity that gets presented here. And I'll tell you this, it's a lot easier to control ryegrass from the pre-emerge perspective than it is to control it say late winter, early spring, when it's big, it's got a strong canopy, and at that point, it's also starting to slow down physiologically. So things like glyphosate or Roundup at the end of the dormant period next spring, sometimes that can be a difficult task as far as controlling ryegrass at that stage. But applying a pre-emerge in the fall, we can prevent a lot of it from ever coming up. We never see it, so we don't have that competition. Again, understand pre-emerges are treating soil, not plants, especially in the case of the two that we're going to talk about here in a second. So we want to apply them where we had that annual grass problem previously. And again, apply early enough that we have a good chance of getting a rain on that field to activate the herbicide, move it into the soil so that it can have a chance at being active on our annual grass seed. The selectivity at play here, because we're applying these pre-emerges while our warm season perennials are still actively growing, is that an established perennial has a root system already. It's got a root system that goes down feet in many cases. So that root system is not going to be significantly impacted by a pre-emerge that's just present in the top, inch, 2 inches of the soil profile. Okay, the bulk of the water and nutrients that are actively growing perennial warm season grasses are taking up are coming from depth. They're not coming from that shallow zone of the soil. So that's our safety in this case. However, if you're one of those annual ryegrass seed that's in that top region of the soil, and you've got something like pendimethalin in the soil around you, it's going to be very detrimental. In this case, that's what we're after. So the two products we can use in this time period would be Resilon or Prowl H2O. Both of these are labeled for any perennial warm season forage grass. As long as it's established, well established, either of these products could be used. Either of these are very good on annual grasses, as well as some annual broadleaf weeds too. Caveat to all this, if you're doing any kind of fall overseeding, obviously we don't want to use a pre-emerge. I don't want to introduce a herbicide to the system that's effective on annual grass seed if I'm trying to establish or overseed some annual grass seed. So if you got overseeding in the plans for the next couple of years, I don't want to touch either of these two products. However, if you've got a well-established pasture, I'm interested in that warm season grass only, I want to reduce the competition in that system as much as possible, then this makes sense. The other opportunity that occasionally presents itself is when we have a warm season grass that we consider to be weedy, that we don't really have a good way to control otherwise in the system. So in this example, I've got Dallas grass. If I'm just grazing that pasture, I'm probably not that worried about Dallas grass. But again, high quality hay, I'm going to view that more as a weed. Dallas grass is not one of those species we can selectively take out of a Verboten grass setting. However, on occasion, you will see Dallas grass still actively green, happy, growing into the fall at a period of time when a Bermuda grass has already become dormant. In this case, we've got about 10 days, maybe 9 days here where we still have optimal temperatures for Dallas grass growth, but we have our Bermuda grass that's already gone into full dormancy. In that case, that's a very simple problem to solve. If we're there and we're monitoring that pasture closely and can catch that period of time, I can go out there with a non-selective herbicide like glyphosate to get some level of control of those Dallas grass plants before they go into dormancy, to then reduce the Dallas grass pressure going into the following year. As long as my desirable grasses of interest have fully gone into dormancy at that period, I'm not going to hurt them. Glyphosate doesn't really have any soil activity. So a lot of times this is a very narrow window. It could be a week, occasionally a couple of weeks. Some years we don't have this window at all because we go from kind of our Indian summer to just a massive cold blast from the Arctic and everything goes dormant at once. But on occasion, if you're paying attention, you'll see these windows open up. And when that happens, be prepared to take advantage of it. Okay, moving on. Now we're looking at the spring. So same kind of setup as before, but we're looking at the winter period going from about February 1st through about May. So we can see our warm season grass is waking up. We can see our annual ryegrass, our cool season grass kind of playing out over time. There's a couple of opportunities that can present themselves here. The first one being very easy. If I've got a bunch of cool season vegetation out there that I'm concerned is going to inhibit the transition period from cool season to warm season, prevent my warm season grasses from establishing quickly, I can use glyphosate, a non-selective herbicide, in that dormant period to help reduce that competition. Again, usually that's more successful the earlier we do it. When we get to late winter, early spring, some of those cool season plants become kind of difficult to control. So this is a really wide window, but it is a way to help mitigate some of that competition in the spring. Also, if we have some warm season grasses that come up before, let's say, our Bermuda grass, in this case, you can see Dallas grass wakes up a little earlier than Bermuda. Our annual warm season here, sandbur, wakes up quite a bit earlier. That's another opportunity. We can hit it with a non-selective herbicide and reduce that competition. The other opportunity in our dormant period is the use of a pre-emerge to control warm season annual weeds. In this case, I'm looking at sandbur, okay? It's going to be one of the earliest warm season annuals to come up in this system. If I go in sometime in January and put down a pre-emerge, either Resilon or Prolyl H2O that we just talked about, I can very effectively control that sandbur. But again, I've got to apply it early enough to allow time and chances for rain to occur to activate that herbicide. So hopefully this gives you some ideas. Mostly the takeaway I would leave with you is, as an observer of your pasture, observer of your hayfield, during these transition periods from summer to winter and then back in the spring, as things are going into and out of dormancy, pay attention. When does species X, Y, or Z tend to enter those periods? And think about what opportunities we would have to maybe control some problem weed species during those critical periods of the year. So with that, I think I've used all of my time. Here's my contact info. Please reach out if I can ever help with anything, and thank you.
All right. Thanks, Josh, for that great presentation. And thanks again to our door prize sponsors, Bamert Seed, Native American Seed, Quail Forever, Renewable Resources Extension Act, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We appreciate your support of Plant Party. Thanks again to all of our speakers, and of course to all of you for attending our 20th Plant Party webinar. Again, Plant Party is a quarterly advanced plant webinar training series brought to you by USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. Our next Plant Party will be on December the 10th with the theme Identifying Plants Without Leaves or Flowers. You don't want to miss out on that mysterious fun. We'll send an email with more information to all the past registrants. We'll see you next time.